in 2019. There was a subsequent zoning amendment process, which included minor standards. Oh, okay. I was just told the sound is not coming through, so I may have to restart. So
He's working on it right now.
okay. Commissioners, I don't know if you heard that, but this doesn't sound like the sound is working on AMP right now. So I'm going to go back and start my presentation again, and we're going to wait for to get the okay.
Make sure the sound is going.
I can hear you fine, so just letting you know.
I can hear you.
Mario just said he was okay.
Okay, Erica just said it's on now.
Okay, well, let me start over again because I want to make sure we have a complete review of this item. We may have been having some sound difficulties as I started the presentation, so I'm just going to start at the beginning.
It's on TV, but not YouTube yet. I'm sorry.
So I should stop?
I think so. Because
Okay.
it has to be live through YouTube. And
Okay.
it's a longer delay through Comcast. So if it's not working on YouTube.
Not fixed yet.
And he's gonna text me an update when he's ready to. Sorry about this.
I think Terry's sitting on the wire.
It could be. There is a wire here. This is the high-tech world of City of Monterey.
Uh-oh.
There's police tape on it. I'm sure it's okay.
So right now, we're just waiting for the sound to be fixed. It sounds like it's okay within the meeting, okay on AMP, and now we're trying to resolve the YouTube channel. So just one moment, please.
It looks okay.
No, he's just joking.
I was fooling.
Okay,
Something used to do. with
Erica said
cable.
it's up.
Mhm.
She's hearing the meeting on YouTube and channel 20.
Okay, it appears all three issues have been resolved, so I will try it a third time. This afternoon, the Planning Commission is being asked to consider an addendum to the mitigated negative declaration for the Garden Road rezone. Just a reminder, the City of Monterey approved this rezone in June of 2019. And really the major reason for the rezone was to create a multifamily overlay zoning district for the portion of Garden Road between Garden Road and Highway 68. And that really created the development opportunity for 405 new housing units. There was a cap basically established within that zoning amendment. After that zoning amendment was approved, there was a secondary amendment that the Planning Commission and then ultimately the City Council approved that removed the need for a use permit for residential projects and changed a lot of the discretionary items we would have looked at in a use permit to development standards that the project had to meet. So what is an addendum? And basically an addendum is an opportunity where the city has a previously certified and adopted environmental document, such as an EIR, mitigated NADEC, or a negative declaration, if only minor technical changes or additions are necessary, or none of the conditions call for the preparation of subsequent environmental review. So what is your role today? So the Planning Commission is charged with approving CEQA documents for the City of Monterey. The proposed project, and as I mentioned, I should just clarify again, you're not considering a use permit or any other document today. The second part is the proposed project basically involves retrofit of an existing office building into 64 apartment units. And that's really what we envisioned with that zoning amendment. If possible, to take a building and have it retrofitted into residential units. And the apartments are principally permitted. The project will require an architectural review permit. I attached those plans to the submittal so you could see what those look like. And that will be scheduled for a future architectural review committee meeting. We did require a couple supplemental background reports. to ensure that some of the new metrics that we look at, did it change, for example, between how we originally evaluated it to the proposed new project? And if you remember, we originally looked at level of service for traffic. The new standard we've adopted is vehicle miles traveled. And this project is within the projections, and there's no significant impacts identified under either measure. We also had under air quality, the GHG, which is the greenhouse gas numbers recalculated, and those are also within the projections. So from staff's perspective, and we documented that through a fairly extensive addendum, looking at the original impacts, the changes to the CEQA checklist, and this project, we find the project to be fully consistent with what was anticipated in the original CEQA document. There have been no new significant impacts identified. There's no increased severity of impacts, and no certain change circumstances or information that would change how we reached our original conclusions. I do have here, these are the mitigation measures that the Planning Commission and City Council ultimately adopted for the rezone. And I thought it'd be helpful just to walk through these because they were considered as part of the project and still will be applicable as we move through construction. So in air quality, there is a very specific watering disturbed areas of future construction project sites twice a day. There's there's specific requirements on how that is to occur. For biological resources, we thought that if a project would need to have soil or vegetation disturbance that was significant, maybe they would demolish the existing buildings and start over, that we needed to have a biological resource survey done. Since we're converting an existing building, we did not require a biological survey due to the lack of disturbance sort of out of the main footprint of the building. Cultural resources are typical cultural resource requirements, and that is if any unexpected archaeological resources are discovered, construction work shall be halted within 50 meters of the find until a plan can be developed. There's also our standard if there's human remains found, which happens very infrequently, but it's a standard condition we use through the state of California. Hazard and hazardous materials. There was actually on one end of the street, much closer to the airport, there was an old closed cleanup site for hazardous materials. And this site is so far down the road, it's on the opposite end of the street, that there was no need to have a site contamination study prepared because the potential site is all the way down closer to the airport. So this was land use planning. Originally, the projects would require a conditional use permit to look at open space, parking, laundry storage, lighting, and noise. This is something that was actually changed with the subsequent zoning amendment, and all of these issues were codified. The parking requirement, the open space, laundry storage, lighting, and noise. So there's no longer a requirement for this use permit condition, and the proposed project, just so you know, complies with 100% of our development standards that will be reviewed by the Architecture Review Committee. So public services, the issue of built-in fire protection, the building will have to meet, the conversion of use will trigger fire sprinklers. And there is lighting proposed at the site. So the crime prevention through environmental design will also be looked at by the Architecture Review Committee. There was a requirement, there was a thought process as we were going through the multifamily rezone that this should become part of our neighborhood improvement project. Those boundaries have actually already been amended, and this is included in a neighborhood boundary now.
For what neighborhood?
I think I saw it in the closer to the Casanova Oak Knoll neighborhood, like it extended and captured Garden Road, that area. So they are going to have to confirm as part of their building permit process the adequate conveyance and capacity to the Monterey One water and make sure everything's in compliance. They're going to have to abandon any sewer laterals that if there's extra sewer laterals, they'll have to abandon the old ones prior to final building inspection. And then it's just talking about maintenance of sanitary sewer, storm drain, et cetera, will have to be maintained as part of the final building permit. Will ensure that that occurs. We also have, as you probably are aware, there's very specific now stormwater review and that starts at the very first permit, which is architectural review. You'll see the plans include a stormwater plan to comply with all of the conformance regulations. That's currently being evaluated by our engineering division and will have to be signed off first before it goes to the architectural review committee. That's the initial review. The second review happens as part of the building permit. We anticipate full compliance with stormwater regulations. So with that, those are the existing mitigation measures that will be applied to this project through the architectural review committee permit as well as the building permit. And we're recommending that the planning commission accept public comment and ultimately adopt the attached resolution certifying the addendum. Because in our opinion, and as we've demonstrated in the document, substantial evidence demonstrates that the proposed project does not create any new significant impacts or increase the severity of previously identified significant impacts, nor are there any new circumstances or new information that would create such impacts or require more robust analysis. So that concludes my presentation. And I believe the applicant is also available online for any questions.
Okay,
Question?
questions for Kim?
I have. Stephen, really quick. On page 73 of the packet, just a clarification sign under mitigation measure 5. The project site is a substantial distance from the project site. We got, what is that supposed to say?
I can modify that to say the project site is a substantial distance from the known contamination site.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. That's all I have.
Okay. Mike,
We called for 405 units, and this is the first that has come to get a permit.
Not exactly. So let me explain. There were 3 projects submitted simultaneously by Brad Salama, 2000 Garden Road, 2600 Garden Road, and 2300 Garden Road. The other 2 project sites were under 5 acres and meet the relatively new CEQA exemptions
Oh,
for infill housing development. This site did not because it exceeded 5 acres, and just by that criteria, it did not meet that requirement. So this site has 64 units. We've done all the studies to show that it complies. The other 2 projects are actually going to the Architectural Review Committee on, I believe it is January 19th. We've done the same studies for those sites and have documented it through the exemption that they comply with the exemption under CEQA. So in total, we have 64 for this site, 34 for another, and I'm going to forget what 2000 Garden Road is. It was originally 99, and I think it was downsized to about 60 units to comply with on-site water credits.
okay, packet page 65.
Is that
in the-
65?
It's in the Kimley Horn report.
Okay.
They called for 73 apartments.
So originally, what they were looking at were slightly larger projects. And like I said, they downsized the projects to comply with the water credits on site. So the original technical reports, some of them analyzed even more
It says-
units.
This says it's a draft.
Yeah, so, but that was the document that they
Okay.
submitted.
And packet page 6-8,
Mhm.
where is that? It called about halfway down. It calls for home-based work only. When you're referring to the VMT. Says Exhibit 1 summarizes the total VMT produced and attracted, paren, home-based work only. And that kind of surprised me. So we're assuming that these people are going to be working from home? The people in the apartments?
I don't know exactly. That was, they've
It's
used,
somebody else's report. It's not ours.
yeah, so that was, the traffic consultant prepared this. What we were looking at is sort of the vehicle miles traveled summary that showed the net decrease.
Right.
And I'm not sure I can answer that detailed question. Ron Sissom might be able to, for the EMC, who is the applicant who's on the phone. We might want to wait till we go through commissioner comments and then see if he can, I'm assuming he's listening to this and can respond.
He did raise a hand, so I think he might have an answer.
Well, maybe the applicant can come and yell at us.
Sounds like a good idea.
Are we finished with commissioner questions?
Let's find
I
out.
am.
No, Terry, no, I think Mike is not finished, right?
I'm done.
You're done. Terry,
Thanks, Kim. Just a simple one. So forgive me if I'm not reading this thoroughly, but what has changed exactly? It's not clear what's actually changed from the negative declaration.
Nothing. Nothing's changed, but the project's not exempt. And we worked with our CEQA attorney and an addendum was required to evaluate the project. Was the most, I guess, prudent approach to document the differences that have occurred in the CEQA checklist since the original project was approved. And some of those changes include when the project was originally approved, our city used an LOS standard.
Right.
There's now vehicle miles traveled. So what we did is we compared it against the new standard just for the most secure environmental document.
Okay. Thank you.
so very minor.
Yeah, there's no change to the vision. I mean, all the units that when we get to that 405 limit, then you'll see the city say it'll trigger a zoning amendment. We're well below that limit at this point.
And several of the attachments on the agenda packet refer to 2600 Garden Road. And
That's history. That's,
yeah,
they're looking at when this was done in, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or whatever.
right.
Yeah, he may also be looking at the air quality analysis that was done for all three sites, and that starts on page, it looks like 69 of the package. We had them look at, they took the conclusions of all three projects and put it in one memo.
Okay.
And so it's the same memo that's being attached to all three staff reports.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, then. Anybody else? Mike Brassfield?
Oh, yes. Kim, we're make it a little bit more personal. When we talk about 405 units, what do you think the population will be in people?
So I think it'll probably be less than 2 people per unit.
Depends on
So less than 810?
Approximately, yeah, about 800.
Okay, and any kids?
Well,
That kind of number?
that could be a mix of household sizes depending on the units. And I mean, you could have, sure, you could, in some of these scenarios, and especially the other projects, you may have family households, but you may have senior households, you may have single households. I'm just trying to use an average per household number that we generally see in Monterey.
That's exactly what I was getting at. Has there been any discussion with the schools if this is going to require school buses?
So the school district requires development impact fees. And as part of their project, as part of the issuance of building permits, they have a fairly hefty per child fee, not per child, per unit fee in order to construct the units. And I have not had any specific discussions with this project with the school district regarding busing.
And the reason I asked, I didn't see anything in the traffic report regarding school buses or actually any other buses in the neighborhood. That's why I asked. So thank you. I noticed that there's a couple of things. One of them, I read in a couple of places, it talks about 8-foot fences. When I asked in the past, they said, well, in our neighborhoods, we can only have 6-foot fences. Is this a change in rule or for this type of development?
No, our development standards are still 6-foot fences, so I'm not sure. You know, when we get to the architectural review committee, if there's 6-foot or 8-foot fences, we'll need to address that.
Well, because in at least 2 places I found the mention of that no higher than 8-foot fences. And that just kind of threw a wrench into my thought process. Next question, it talked about a 26% increase in impervious surfaces that would generate runoff. Have they been identified any potential flooding areas?
So that's what's reviewed as part of the stormwater plan. And so that stormwater plan is on the first, I believe, the first page of the drawings and is currently under review by our engineering division. But basically, at the end of the day, with the engineering, there's no net increase in runoff from the site that's allowed. So, and whether or not they'll need to have some retention or do some different things where the water is moved to landscaped areas, all of that is now highly calculated. I guess I'm looking on the packet page. Yeah, all of that's starting to be calculated on the preliminary drainage management plan. It's plan sheet C1.
Yeah.
I read it, understanding portions of it. But it, in general, when you develop an area, you typically have a problem area, whether the insufficient size on drainage pipe or what. That's why I asked if the engineer had identified any potential flooding area problem, because this also affects a state highway as well.
So, and you'll remember that's in one of the mitigation measures and conditions of approval. That
Yep.
review right now is underway prior to architecture, the first approval of the actual development plan, which will occur at the architecture review committee. So
Thank
that
you.
review is pending.
Thank you. Has this area been tested for water contamination like we've had in our neighborhood?
No.
Okay. Living adjacent to an airport, that's frequently a problem, particularly with an old military airport. On noise, there is an impact to living near the airport. Even in my neighborhood, we have a noise problem. And I didn't really think about it until I started reflecting on my own background, having lived at the end of Miramar. And it was a lot of noise. It was a lot of hazard. We actually had a jet run its landing gear over our Quonset hut, and it put a small groove in the roof. As you can imagine, that irritated and upset a lot of people, including 4 young kids. And I don't anticipate that happening here, but that is a problem living next to an airport. And I worry about trauma to kids, but I don't see anything in CEQA that considers ages in a CEQA process. Just to humans, but I don't see a distinction between adults or children. Anyway, it was just an observation. I assume that we're going to be talking about triple pane windows in these buildings.
So the windows have to meet a threshold of, to allow noise not more than 45 decibels. So it's a threshold versus saying it's triple pane or not. It may end up being that, but they'll have to meet that requirement as part of the building permit.
Okay.
And that's page 30 or 113 of the CEQA document.
Yeah, I went through that. Thank you. In the traffic plans, it discussed that they will need a bridge at Garden and Fairgrounds over 68 increase. Has there been any discussion of who's going to and how that going to be paid for?
Everybody seen it?
I'm just
I do
looking
not
up the
remember seeing a bridge.
transportation section previously, just so. Yeah, I'm not seeing that reference. What I'm seeing on page 120 of the previous CEQA document, and I may be missing it, is it was talking about the Highway 68 corridor and the ultimate plans for, right now, TAMC is completing a study to install roundabouts along Highway 68.
Yep.
And that's sort of the current long-term plan. And TAMC collects development impact fees for regional construction that will be per housing unit. So that I see on page 120. You're saying there's a bridge discussion?
Well, there's several references to the traffic impacts of the LOS F rate and the impact at Garden and Fairgrounds. And they talked about having to increase the size of the bridge to allow another lane to make turns.
Oh, that bridge, the auto bridge, not a pedestrian bridge.
It's the auto bridge.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if I didn't see it in the report regarding payment for such a major issue.
Fairground Road is a city, is it not?
It is.
It's
And
not-
so I'm seeing it.
It's not Caltrans.
Yeah, so the traffic report on the original rezone on page 120 of the packet, it actually shows a decrease in the proposed traffic. Originally, it was estimated at Garden Road and Fairgrounds. There was a cumulative, it was F and a cumulative 363 looks like trips, and it was decreased with this to 228. So the rezoning actually looks like it's making the existing situation better, which typically means that you don't have to mitigate for that if you're making it better than what existed historically. So I don't
Yes,
see
that's why it in the discussion and the analysis, it described that in order to maintain or reduce the LOS, they needed to add this bridge. And that just kind of threw me. Who was going to pay for it?
So I'm not seeing that reference in the
Kim,
traffic.
it's on packet page 180, middle of the page.
180?
Yes. item page 176.
I thought it was somewhat strange that it would refer to LOS when we switched from LOS to VMT for traffic purposes.
Well, and that's because this traffic report, and this is what you're looking at here, was the attachment to the original mitigated negative declaration that concluded no significant impact for traffic.
Well, has that portion of the report been updated?
It was updated to VMT and we're showing no significant impact under VMT. And that was that memo that was attached to the addendum.
Okay.
So I don't know if that has changed, but no significant event. I would think that building a bridge is a significant event.
It also takes into account those roundabouts. Without the
Well,
roundabout, nothing.
that was another question that they talked about the roundabouts and how great they were, even though it still maintains an F rate at morning and evening, but they didn't talk about a roundabout at Garden and Fairgrounds.
No.
So I guess what I can say is the original CEQA document that was adopted that looked at this study did not require construction of the bridge, is what I can say. And it showed a less than significant impact in the actual write-up of the initial study. And the conclusion was
This is 2019. Talking about it.
and remember, it was even supposed to get better.
Yeah,
That's what they all say.
and you would know. I just think, Kim, that's a serious concern that for a project of this size, that it's going to require, if it was going to require a bridge to be built to make the project work, because the traffic, there is no lower level than F in the LOS system, as I read it. And yet it says it's going to be maintained at LOS because of this project.
So you have to remember, we're replacing office trips with residential trips, right? So the office building goes away, the residential takes over. It shows here in the traffic analysis that even though under cumulative it's F, it gets better. And so you don't require mitigation for where it's getting better. You
Well-
only can require mitigation if it's declining. So I'm assuming that's why in 2019, the regional traffic impact fee was the way to address this issue.
But it didn't improve on the F. That it's still an F at peak hours.
So you can't charge new projects to correct existing deficiencies. You only can solve the issue by whatever this project makes it worse.
Okay,
So that's always the nuance that doesn't ever really make sense to people, but that's what you're allowed to address. And I guess because I'm showing here that all of, like on that table on page 120, it shows all the traffic scenarios are improving. Still at F at Olmsted Highway 68, Olmsted Garden, and Garden Road Fairgrounds.
thank you, Kim. I'm done, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Okay. Is there anybody else who has a question for Kim on the commission? Okay. Let's close commissioner questions and let's open this up to public comment. You know, before we do that, the applicant may want to make a presentation because we had a standing question. What does home-based work only mean? So why don't we go to the applicant or his representative?
Kim, this is Hanson. Can you stop sharing your screen so that my thing can go back to normal? Thanks.
And I do have the consultant for the applicant, Ron, on the line with the hands raised.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for considering this item tonight. My name is Ron Sissom. I work with EMC Planning Group here in Monterey, and we're supporting Brad Slama in this application process. And we did or facilitated the technical analyses that Kim had represented were done for each of these sites, in part to support, you know, Kim's conclusion for this site in particular that this project would have no new significant environmental effects. So in relationship to the question about VMT, I will be the first to admit that the whole VMT rubric is a bit convoluted. How VMT is calculated is commonly dependent in some circumstances on the type of project that's being evaluated and where it's located. There are different ways to calculate what VMT is and where, you know, cars and trucks and people from individual projects are going to or passing by or originating from, if you will. You know, this whole notion of how this is done is called, the general rubric is called a trip tour. So there's many ways that this can be done. Kimberly Horn, who has been working with the city on its VMT policy over time and is very well versed in how VMT works, I think concluded that this was the most appropriate methodology to use, considering in particular that these are infill sites in an urban area that are residential. There may be, for example, different ways to calculate VMT for a commercial project that's situated within an urban area versus outside an urban area, and other types of projects where trips are passing by, so they might not originate in the project site versus originating or the site being a destination for trips. So that may not be a very satisfying answer, but I think the major conclusion is that Kimberly Horn used the trip approach type that was most appropriate for this project type in this context.
In layman's terms, does that mean that home-based work only means getting into the car at your home and driving someplace else to work?
For the most part, yes. I don't know that, and I don't believe, and I'd have to go back and look at this, and I'm not even sure. In fact, I don't have the study in front of me, I'm afraid. I hate to say that, but it's true. That I don't believe they would have accounted for, I don't think explicitly anyway, although I could be mistaken, for people working at home and reducing trips that in that regard. So yes, I think the worst case would have been that all of the residents are traveling from their home to different destinations for employment.
Okay.
It's made clear in packet page 181 at the top. First couple sentences.
What was your question?
181.
That's a question.
That's not a question.
Not a
It's like Jeopardy. What is 181?
phrase it as a question.
What is packet page 181? A definition of home-based work only.
Right.
Okay. Would you like to say anything else?
No, I mean, I'm here to answer questions if that will be of help to anybody, but nothing else on that topic.
All right, any questions for the applicant from the commission? All right, don't hear any. So at this point, we should open public comment. And Jennifer, you want to remind people how they can make a comment?
Of course, we encourage members of the public to join our meetings via Zoom Gov, a secure service that connects you live with no lag time. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864 toll free. Once again, that number is 833-568-8864. Then enter the webinar ID, which for this meeting is 161-990-8039. I repeat, the webinar ID for this meeting is 161-990-8039. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. I do have the applicant Ron's hand is raised.
Okay,
Again, I believe since applicant comments are closed, we might need to reopen public comments. Oh, it's lowered. Okay. I see no public commenters raising their hands.
all right. Thank you, Ron, for your help in understanding the nuances of the project. And we've closed public comment, so the time has come for commissioner comments. You want to start, Terry?
Yeah, sure. This seems like a really straightforward sort of due diligence thing on the staff's part to make sure the environmental documents are really ironclad. So it seems like a really straightforward and easy one to me. I did have a question for Kim though. But just remind me, is there going to be affordable housing included in this Garden Road area?
Yes, every project will be required to provide 20% affordable housing. So out of the 64, 20% of those units need to be affordable. Of that 20%, 10% are low income and 10% can be moderate income.
Great, thanks.
And that's codified in the city's code.
Thanks.
Yeah, I also agree with Terry that this is fairly easy, although I don't know why they had 100 pages of traffic analysis. That just drove me crazy. All those little zeros and ones, just because I've done traffic studies before, and this was a big one. This was a big one, and so thanks for all the hard work that the traffic consultant did. But yeah, I'm in favor of okaying this project.
Sure. Steve?
I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Want to make a motion then?
Sure. Make a motion, we approve. Take a look at what it is here we're approving. Gotta look at we approve the addendum to the mitigated negative declaration for the Garden Road zone amendment at 2300 Garden Road. And the findings included in the report from staff.
Okay.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion of the motion?
I just have one point. I think Commissioner Milich's comment about the mitigation monitoring chart to clarify from the known contamination site is appropriate. So I appreciate that comment and would request that he include that in his motion.
So included.
So to repeat the motion, we are voting resolving to certify the addendum to the mitigated negative declaration for Garden Road Zone Amendment, 2,300 Garden Road with the findings as stated in the report and the contamination analysis included.
And the seconder agrees.
So there's been a motion and a second to, Jennifer, you want to call for the roll, the vote?
Yes, and I just want to thank you for repeating that motion for me in full.
Okay.
So for the vote, we have Chair Freeman,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reed,
Yes.
Commissioner Brassfield, Commissioner
You're muted, Mike.
Commissioner Brassfield is muted.
I still have a question on the table. For Kim, on the parking requirements, was there any change from what we normally have for a mixed use, or any other, as far as the project is concerned?
So Commissioner Brassfield's question, is there any change in parking requirements? So there's a parking requirement for the multifamily overlay district that was, and so the project complies with that requirement. And you're asking, so is there any change from, so this was a new zoning district. So I don't know, it has its own parking requirement.
Okay, so that they're different than any other apartment building,
Mhm.
and they're obviously different from the residential neighborhood.
And from single family, yes.
Thank you. That's it. I'd like to answer my question. Thank you.
Would you like to vote yes or no on the resolution?
For the same reasons I voted no on the project last time, I'll vote no.
Okay, and Commissioner Dawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Latassa,
Yes.
Commissioner Milich,
yes,
and Commissioner Fletcher is still absent. The motion carries with a vote of 5.
5.0.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Mhm.
That concludes the discussion on that project. And
So I just want to say that decision is appealable to the city council within 10 days on forms available on planning@monterey.org.
Oh, thank you.
thank you, Kim. We have item number 3 is a planning office update and commissioner comments. And I have one comment. I know Terry has one comment. You want to start with an update from the planning office?
I do. There's a few updates that are happening. One I found out about today. So the city council will be considering next Tuesday a staff potential recommendation to change all our meetings to remote again due to we're seeing some significant increases in COVID at City Hall. So we're trying to minimize our exposure. So at least, so the council will be considering that next Tuesday. We'll find out what they do. You may have read yesterday, the city of Seaside City Hall has closed due to COVID. So I know Hans and our HR department is looking closely at the city's COVID rates for personnel. I did want to mention the other two, I mentioned it came up during the discussion, but the other 2 Garden Road projects, 2000 and 2600 Garden Road, go to the Architectural Review Committee. Basically, I think it's on the 19th. It's a Wednesday. And that's really exciting for us. I think just the one general comment about this, and this is something just to keep in mind, we were originally successful in getting another 9 acre-feet to sort of build out those sites to their maximum. And the state then said we couldn't do that. So that extra housing was going to be 100% affordable. So, the developer has to go forward. They can't wait anymore, but the projects are going to be built within their water credits on site. So it's a lost opportunity. I just want to put that into the context of what will be happening, if you have any time to listen to the AMBAG board meeting online on Wednesday evening, I think it's going to be really important. They're reviewing now our about 5 to 6 different scenarios for our regional housing needs allocation. Original number was around 2,000 for the city of Monterey, 2,000 housing units. There's now proposals up to 4,000 housing units. How that trickles down is ultimately to the housing element. You have to show adequate sites at appropriate densities to accommodate that development. I'll just say 4,000 additional units is a fairly daunting number as a planner, as I start thinking we probably shouldn't be building in our very high fire hazard zone, which is the forested hill behind us. We've got our airport safety zones where we already need to sort of curtail development a little bit around those. I think we're going to have our work if those numbers are adopted. So I think it's important for you to listen and be aware of how those numbers are being considered, and just realize that's going to impact your workload for the next 2 years. Trying to figure
There's
out.
still no water.
And there's still no water. So the housing element discussion will be along with an update to our safety element. And we also have to create an environmental justice element when we update two elements of our general plan. That's going to be a lot of work. Starting in 2022, everything has to be adopted by December of 2023. So we will be focusing on that as a commission, which relates really well. And I'll let Terry and Sandy talk about a letter that they sent, because that's going to be a key consideration as well as sea level rise and erosion. So with that, I just want you to be aware what's happening regionally. And our next meeting will most likely be 100% remote from your home.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
I had a question about that. So one of those projects at Garden Road was 100% affordable?
No, the base density, like the 64, was always 20% affordable.
Right.
That site, they never planned to do any additional housing, but 2,000 and 2,600 Garden Road, if I remember, 2,000 had almost 100 units proposed. That's been cut back by almost 40 units, I believe. And the other project was like in the 70s and was cut back to, I think, 34 units. So we're losing
Because of
out
water.
all because, well, because the state says we cannot use the water from the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. So even it was in their banks, everyone agrees that money's in their banks, that because of the cease and desist order, we could not use that water.
You know, it strikes me as one of the things that could happen. It's ridiculous, but that's why it probably could happen, is that the state would require us to issue building permits and then not allow occupancy because there is no water. And that way, the state would get its fill, be satisfied with having building permits issued. And then the state would also be satisfied that none of them could be occupied because there was no water. So
You're getting tired too.
it's absurd, but it's not absurd when you're talking about bureaucracies, especially at the state level. That's a nightmare that I see for. Hopefully it doesn't happen.
On the positive note, when we got a D- on increased housing in 2020 and 2021, we've saved all the big ones for 2022. And we do have buildings on Lighthouse Avenue that can be occupied residentially that have their own water. And these 3 projects add another boost to that, which means that there will be something besides onesies and twosies from ADUs. So it seems like this is the year to get it started, even though they can't all be built in a year. I have a comment. I went to the city council meeting, the last meeting before Christmas, where the item 2190 North Fremont, the hotel that was objected to by the neighbor, was tabled. And I don't understand what tabled means.
So,
Tabled means it's a not debatable motion. It means it stays there until there's a 2/3 vote to bring it back. As I understand tabling,
Bring it back to the council or to the planning commission?
wherever the council decides it wants to send it.
Okay,
yeah, so we recommended tabling because a 5th noise report was delivered the weekend before the council meeting that needs to be looked at and is being looked at. So we are, I think the applicants, this will be the applicants for the appellant's 3rd noise report they've submitted on the project. And there's at least been 2 counter reports. So this will be a total of 5. So that right now there is potentially another one being prepared to answer the questions raised in the appellant's new noise report.
I'm confused. When I looked at the planning office update, I thought it said that the December 21st city council meeting denied the appeal on, it was 2101 Fremont.
Yeah. So that was the recommendation. So that was the agenda title, and under it was action and it said
Oh,
tabled. So
Okay.
we always just
Okay.
copy verbatim from the agenda,
Right.
the title.
Should read more carefully. Okay.
That was almost 800 pages of work, by the way.
That's a lot of pages.
It was a lot.
a lot of preparation. The other large item is that Terry has taken the lead in writing a letter to Hans Osler and to open investigation solutions for sea level rise. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So Sandy and I both sent a letter to Hans, the city manager, requesting that the city sort of increases its staffing and efforts regarding engineering issues along the waterfront in Monterey. And we're very careful to avoid any Brown Act violations. So that's why just 2 of us wrote the letter. I guess maybe you can tell me, Kim, can we share this letter with the other commissioners, or how does that work?
Sure, we can share any information with the rest of the commissioners. That's fine. We can do that.
Okay. So we sent this letter, and we're going to meet with, the 2 of us are going to meet with Hans and Kim and just kick around these basic ideas of maybe a subcommittee or something. We're not sure what it would be, but some way of sort of monitoring this, really challenging engineering situation along the waterfront. And, I'm not claiming any expertise or anything. It's just, looking at ideas of sort of monitoring the progress of dealing with these challenges to the waterfront.
Thank you.
That's it.
I think it's important, and it will be just as fascinating as it can be what kinds of options are available and what the cost is economically, the people who are living there and to the city commercially. So anyway, I don't have anything else. Does anybody else have a comment? Any other commissioner comments? Mike or Hanson?
I would make one comment. I appreciate what staff did on that last project. And it was a lot of work. And I appreciate the position the city was in. My vote was just an individual opinion on the project. But I don't mean any release or irritation even to Kim or the staff of the project. It's just a process. I appreciate the staff's work. And I also wanted to compliment Jennifer and Chris this morning for helping me so I could at least open the document. And then I spent until 20 minutes before the meeting going through that material. Thank you all.
Okay, then. If there are no further comments, our meeting is adjourned.
Cool.
It's been good seeing everyone in person. I
For the time being.
be online and hopefully in the spring, late spring, we'll be back together.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, I've enjoyed getting
Record.